Hello, Tech fans, and welcome in to the latest Tech Sideline podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Whether you're watching or listening live or archived, we are so glad you could join us today as we record on Wednesday, October 30th, and preview Virginia Tech and Notre Dame this Saturday. Our crew today, as always, we've got Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes producing on the podcast set, our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and head honcho, Will Stewart, and I am your podcast host, Evan Hughes. Thanks to everybody for being with us. A reminder that this week and every week, the Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by the Fisher Law Firm, Virginia's trusted DUI and traffic defense firm, dedicated to defending individuals charged with traffic-related offenses. From their offices in Blacksburg and Roanoke, the Fisher Law Firm handles cases throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. To date, the firm has defended more than 30,000 people charged with moving violations. For free consultation, call anytime, day or evening, toll-free at 1-800-680-7031. Again, that's 1-800-680-7031, or email them at info@fisherlegal.com. Gentlemen, good morning. Great to be back with you guys. Great podcast on Monday. Virginia Tech head wrestling coach Tony Roby stopping by, and now we go back to talking Virginia Tech football. Before I ask you guys how you're doing, though, Will, I want to congratulate you and your wife celebrating your anniversary last week. How was the special day?
That was very cool. We went to we stayed at the Hotel Roanoke. I know I mentioned this in an article. I don't think we talked. We were all business on the podcast when Roby was here. Stayed in the Hotel Roanoke, and Brian Wells, who is the manager of the Hotel Roanoke, Brian shot a couple of. He's done some photography for us. He did a softball game last year and a wrestling match. So I've actually never met Brian in person. We just have one of those email relationships, and Brian put my wife and I up in the Commonwealth Suite, which is the room that Coach stays in. So I believe I bedded down in the same suite that Fuente spends the nights in before home games. So it was really nice. Yeah. And so we had a good time. Really enjoyed it. That's the first time I've ever been to the Hotel Roanoke. There's just a lot of history there. It's a beautiful building. And they, from what I can tell, when they redid it, they preserved as much as they could. I mean, when you get in the elevators look like the original elevators. So it's just a neat place. Highly recommend it. So that's a little free advertising.
Highly recommend the Commonwealth Suite.
Yeah. If you can afford it, the regular price is $375 a night, which really isn't that bad, I don't think. And it's kind of cool. They've got a walkway that goes over to Center in the Square, and I've been meaning to put something on Twitter. We went over to Center in the Square. There's a pinball museum over there. It's not a museum per se. I mean, there's a lot of cool old pinball machines in there, but you pay and you play. So it's not just one where you walk around and look at them. But I also discovered the Roanoke Starcade, which is an arcade room which with games in it from my youth. Because back when I was in high school, we went to arcades and played the big stand-up consoles. In-home console systems weren't a thing yet, Nintendo and all that stuff. And, of course, Xboxes and PlayStation were all way in the future. So I discovered a row of machines. There's about 6 of them, and 3 of them are my favorites: Centipede, Asteroids, and Galaga. So it's $11. Play as much as you want, and I will be going to the Roanoke Starcade and paying my $11.
Did they sell beer?
I don't think so. No.
I went to a barcade in Richmond that
would
had all the old arcade games and probably 40 different beer on tap.
All right, so yeah. I need to plan a trip to.
And you go up in a pour.
I've been. It's in downtown Richmond. Yeah.
Now is that one of those deals where you pay a flat fee and then you just play as much as you want?
I forget exactly.
There's tokens, I believe. If we're talking about the same place,
right?
Yeah.
But
See, the Starcade, you pay a flat fee and you play as much as you want.
Okay.
So back in the day, we used to pump quarters in the machines, and if you wanted a machine and somebody was playing it, then you put a quarter on the machine. Oh. And sometimes popular machines would have 3 and 4 quarters lined up, So I don't know if you're just paying a fee and somebody's hogging a machine, how do you get them off of it? But I'll figure that out. I checked out the high scores on the Centipede machine, and man, I can beat those. If I get myself back in, it's like 150.
You got to get your hand back to 100%.
Yeah,
I do. Well, come to think of it, I do. I think the high score was like 150,000 or something like that, and my high score in my youth and in my prime was like 250, 260,000. So if I get it going, I can leave the room with a high score.
There you have it. Were you a Pac-Man guy back in the day?
No, I never got into Pac-Man. It was that was back when they discovered that there was a certain pattern you could do in Pac. Are you familiar with this? That if once the Pac-Man game starts, if you make a certain sequence of moves, you can just go on and on and on and on and on. You'll never get caught. And there were guys in the arcade that knew that sequence of moves, and of course, that's pretty boring to watch some dude just making pre-programmed moves.
My love of Pac-Man just dwindled down a little bit after learning that. Okay.
Yeah, it's machines I like to think, are never completely random. So somebody discovered the pattern. But I don't know. I was just never a Pac-Man guy. I just never got into it.
You need the 4-player Pac-Man where you play against each other.
No, that would be cool.
I've got that in Richmond. Yep.
Last thing, by the way,
I was like, "Where's he going with that?" He said 4-play.
Listen, last year we actually got to record on Halloween. It is the day before Halloween as we record on Wednesday morning, October 30th. So before we dive in, I do have to ask, what's your favorite candy on Halloween?
Man, well, it's little candy bars. It's more of what grosses me out on Halloween. Any marshmallow candy, yeah, blech. I like the little candy bars, like the little fun size ones. Snickers. Not a big Three Musketeers fan.
Okay.
I like the Nestle Crunch. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. Twix is always good, and Kit Kat. So that's my thing. I could eat those forever.
Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, same as every other day of the year. Okay.
There you go. Okay, we've got a lot to dive into on the podcast today, and so glad everybody could join us. Sideline Podcast recording on Wednesday morning, October 30th. We've got the normal crew. Virginia Tech is coming off the bye week, and the Hokies and the Irish will play on Saturday. We will break it all down. I do, for our listener or our viewers on Facebook Live, I want to put a trivia question out there. I want to see if you guys know it. We'll get to it at the end. But before we get in, drop the comment. We'll get to it at the end of the podcast. Virginia Tech is 2-0 in games played in the state of Indiana. Of course, one of the wins being Notre Dame in 2016. What was the other win for Virginia Tech? Okay.
He was in both of them.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious to see if how quickly it'll come on Facebook. So
if you're watching on the video, we got a picture of Touchdown Jesus up on the television screen. That was taken by Ivan Morozov, or Ivan. I prefer he calls it the French pronunciation, Ivan. He took that up there in 2016. That was post-game. So he's got Touchdown Jesus pre-game when it was like, I don't know, mid-afternoon. And that's Touchdown Jesus post-game with the lights on and everything. And it's cool. I don't know if you can still see it, but I didn't realize until we went up to the game in 2016 that you can sit in the stands and you, if you're up, I don't know if you even need to be up that high, but Touchdown Jesus is basically at one end of the stadium. You can see him out there.
Well, I'm 5 rows from the top this week, so I should have a good view.
And I don't think they blocked the view on the refurbishment of their stadium. That was the other thing. When we were up there in 2016, they were just starting a expansion. What's the word I'm looking for? Modernization of their stadium.
That's a good way to say it.
They were old school. They didn't have a video board. So one of the things that was kind of interesting that I remember about being up there, other than the fact that it was extremely cold, is that you know how you'll be in Lane Stadium or some other stadium and they'll show you video highlights on the video board? Well, Notre Dame would run audio highlights over the PA system, from games past, because they didn't have a video board. But I remember sitting in the stadium and they were in the process of, at one end, building that structure that would hold the board. So I'm looking forward to getting there and seeing what it looks like now that they've modernized it. And they also, when they redid their stadium, I don't know a lot about it. I just know that capacity got reduced from about 80,000 to about 77,000. So they probably wiped out some seats for luxury boxes and that sort of thing. So they were very much on the tail end of that. Everybody else had already done it when they finally got around to it.
We'll have to have a portion of the podcast on Monday reserved for just the experience of being back at the revamped Notre Dame Stadium.
Okay. I hope to be here on Monday. I'm flying back out of Chicago Sunday night. The last time I flew out of Chicago, my flight was delayed by 3 hours. So I hope that doesn't happen again.
Yeah. So the stadium is one thing. Now, two places I've never been are I did not go to Texas A&M when Tech went down there, and I didn't go to Nebraska when Tech went there. But I did go to South Bend in 2016, and they are the nicest fans you could ever be around.
Interesting.
Very hospitable, just very nice fans. People don't really talk about that. They talk about how great Nebraska fans are. Everybody knows how great Nebraska fans are. And I have been told that the Texas A&M fans were great, but people don't really talk about Notre Dame fans being great, but they were awesome.
All right, again, looking forward to the update from you guys on how it is. Again, both Will and Chris are going to the game on Saturday.
And one more thing I want to throw out there is that we are doing a tailgate with a group up there called Tailgate the Bend. It's at a restaurant. It's Parisi's restaurant, which has been in South Bend for decades. Mm-hmm. And when you step out of the front of Parisi's restaurant, you can see the football stadium. It's about a 5-minute walk. And so they're having a big tailgate. So far, I think we've sold close to 200 tickets for them. So there will be 200 TSL people there. They're also working with VT Scoop, the 24/7 sports site. So I think they're going to bring some people too. So for $100, unlimited food, unlimited beer, live entertainment, and a cash liquor bar. And certainly we've been pushing this on the site and selling tickets for them for weeks. But if you want to show up on game day, you can do that. So probably the best way to find out about that is to go to Tech Sideline and go to any one of our football schedules, and look on the schedule and look next to the Notre Dame game. You'll see a little icon that says Tailgate the Bend. So click that and find out if you're interested in coming and tailgating with us.
There you go. Go to TechSideline.com for more information. Listen, we've got a lot to dive into after this bye week, and obviously this is an important game. I want to start with you, Chris. Going back to the North Carolina win, the thrilling 6 overtime victory. If you go back and watch the sideline reporter interview Coach Fuente minutes after that game's over, one of the things that stood out to me was him saying how Tech needed to get healthy. And that was one of the main areas of concern after that North Carolina game. So obviously you can't control when the bye week is, but in hindsight, how important was it to have a bye week after the North Carolina game?
Important, but I said before the Duke game, this is a perfect time for a bye week also. And then they got thumped 45-10 by Duke.
Yeah.
So I agree from a health standpoint for sure. Like I don't know that Hendon Hooker would have been able to play this past weekend, but sounds like he's going full speed now, unless Fuente's just, using the media to trick.
Fuente has never lied to us, to my knowledge, about injuries.
Yeah.
He doesn't like to talk about them, but he said the other day, words to the effect of, he's out there running around, he looks great.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's ever said something like that and been lying about it. So
yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like they'll get Deshaun Crawford back, which is big. He's in Virginia Tech's.
Did people ask about Crawford the other day?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I think so. I think so. But I'd be surprised. I mean, he missed the Rhode Island game. He missed the North Carolina game, and now he's had a bye week.
Yeah.
It'd be a surprise if he wasn't back to full speed.
Hopefully he'll be 100%.
Caleb Farley will be back. I think Caleb Farley could have played the second half against Notre Dame. It's just, these days Virginia Tech has those computer monitors and helmets that monitor hits and says, oh, he can't play anymore because he's concussed, when he's may or may not be concussed. Right. I watched Fuente's post-game press conference after UNC, and he was like, yeah, he was over there on the sideline with us. He was fine.
Yeah.
And he didn't roll his eyes because the camera was on him, but I think in his head he was rolling his eyes because Farley could have played that second half for sure. Fortunately,
they won.
Yeah, fortunately, Armani Chapman.
And Armani Chapman played pretty well, yeah.
So it sounds like all the guys that were Caleb Farley's, the Hendon Hookers, Deshaun Crawford, sounds like they will be healthy for this week against Notre Dame.
Sounds like it.
Will, let me ask you this. Having a bye week after a 6 overtime game, psychologically, is that important, do you think, at all, not having to play a game after such a big high like that game?
Man, I just don't know. Everybody has their opinions on what bye weeks do. We all know they help the team get healthier. As to what they do mentally, there's two sides to that coin. Hey, we're winning. Let's keep playing. We've seen teams come off of bye weeks and play great. We've seen teams come off of bye weeks and play terrible. It's just it's hard to pin down.
I don't think it really matters. well, maybe that's the wrong way of phrasing it. I'm thinking there are examples on both sides.
Right.
Like, Miami had a bye week before us, right? Or no, they did not.
Are you sure?
No, actually,
I think Miami did.
they did have a bye week before us,
Yeah.
and we beat them. And Virginia had a bye week before Miami, and Miami was coming off a short week, and Miami beat Virginia. I just don't see I'm sure if you really did the research for every program, there's something that says, yeah, on the whole, teams coming off a bye week do better. Probably the case, but I don't think it's overwhelming. I just don't think it's that big a deal. I think to me, the bye week is about, getting healthy, like you said. And honestly, I don't know that. I don't know how much you sit around and prepare for the other team. Like if you're like Fuente rested some guys last week. He was like, yeah, we didn't get as much work for the Dalton Keens and the Rayshard Ashbys on the team. I mean, those guys already know what to do. We wanted to rep some of the younger guys. And I think Tech really worked on themselves rather than sitting there working on Notre Dame stuff.
And I don't know that they gave players, the team days off from practice per se, but that North Carolina game was a huge recruiting weekend for Tech. They had a lot of guys.
Was it over
in town.
100? Was that the number?
The number 150 was thrown around. I don't think they had 150 recruits there.
No.
I think that probably included family members.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
But it gives the coaches a chance to follow up on some of that. If they're not game planning for a specific opponent, then they can take the time at night to make calls and things like that.
Yeah, some members of the staff had a bunch of guys at PK's on Sunday when I was in there for lunch.
Yeah.
So, it's and normally, you're sitting around watching film of the upcoming opponent at that point, right?
Yeah, game planning and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it was a good time for a big recruiting weekend also. Yeah. So that was the best week of the season in all aspects for Virginia Tech.
Yep.
I'm going to break down the bye, getting ready to preview Notre Dame here on the Tech Sideline Podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm. Listen, one of the big questions going into this week, one that's getting a lot of chatter on social media and the message boards, is who's going to be the backup quarterback for Virginia Tech moving forward? Well, I'll let you start. Who do you think?
Looks like it's Quincy. Chris, is that correct?
I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I just when you pull Willis, when you bench him for the second time, and it's so hard to have a game plan for Hendon Hooker that is the same game plan as Ryan Willis, right? They're just two totally different quarterbacks. Ryan's an athletic guy. He's got good straight-ahead speed. He'd be effective running the read option. He just can't read.
and we've seen him do it a few times. Like I remember the very first game he played against Old Dominion, he made one really good read, and man, he was downfield 20 yards, 20 or 30 yards. And I specifically remember he surprised Old Dominion's defense.
Right.
One guy barely caught him, or it would have been a touchdown.
Well,
so he's got the speed.
So Tech was better with running the read option with Josh Jackson than Ryan Willis, even though Jackson isn't as good an athlete as Willis.
Right.
Because he didn't make the wrong read as many times as Willis did. With Quincy in there, you could basically run the same running offense. You scale back the passing game to a certain extent, obviously. Yeah. But, you basically, you don't have to worry about, oh, gosh, what do we do with Willis in at quarterback? And I get tired of saying this because, honestly, you can't really do much with Willis at quarterback. He just he doesn't read defenses well enough. He doesn't process things quickly. He's a pocket passer who can run, but he can't read the field.
Right.
So there's no point in throwing him in there unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
People talk about, you need to game plan to his strengths. Well, his strengths are literally throwing bombs and
throwing the fade.
Right. You can't throw a bomb every play.
Right.
Okay. You have to be able to execute your regular offense, and he can't do that. And I hope. I don't dislike Willis or anything, but I hope we've seen the last of him because I don't like pointing out his deficiencies because at this point it's obvious he's just not a good college quarterback. And I think it's easier on Virginia Tech to game plan with Hooker and Patterson as your top two as opposed to Hooker and Willis. And quite frankly, it speeds up Quincy's development by getting him more reps.
I think probably a better way to put it is that Ryan is certainly not suited for this offense and what the coaches want to run. But how many programs are
honestly
are running
I don't
something?
think he's suited for any offense. Any offense, you've got to
you have an issue with him reading zone defenses, regardless of what the offense is.
Right. If you can't run the read option, fine. Then play in a high profile passing offense, right? Well, if you can't read defenses, you can't do that either.
Yeah.
So if you can't read coverages, you can't do that either. So
and some of his decision making has been suspect, and that's what got him pulled against North Carolina, was eating the ball on a sack. And I think that's the moment where Fuente finally just snapped and said, "Man, we need to do something."
He ate the ball on two passing plays on one drive.
Yeah.
And I know he had a guy open on one of them, and either one of them though, he had plenty of time to just throw the ball away.
Right.
He just doesn't make quick decisions. So you talk about the system or who's a fit. He's not. He's a backup quarterback for anybody with a halfway decent quarterback in whatever system, in my opinion.
So let me ask you guys this, because Hooker's going to be back, likely going to start if he plays. There are some people that say, hey, Quincy Patterson, Elite 11 quarterback, big-time prospect, comes in, wins the game for Virginia Tech against North Carolina. Why continue to start Hooker over Quincy Patterson? What are the strengths of Hendon Hooker over Quincy Patterson?
I think he has more of a grasp of the passing game right now. I think when Quincy Patterson came in, it was totally unexpected. It's something you don't prepare for. I don't think North Carolina was prepared for a 3 tight end package from Virginia Tech, because the Hokies had hardly run that all year. Well, guess what? Notre Dame will be prepared for that. They were probably going to prepare for it anyway, because that's what Tech did against Notre Dame back in 2016. They went with 3 tight end formations and just hammered. And they could do the same thing this year, because Notre Dame's rush defense is suspect, particularly in their last game against Michigan. But yeah, Quincy doesn't grasp enough in the passing game right now, and you can tell by the play calling against UNC. Now, that being said, you don't rep your third quarterback very much. Coaches play the percentages, right? How many times do you need your third quarterback? When's the last time Virginia Tech needed a third quarterback? Technically, they didn't need Quincy against UNC because Willis didn't get hurt. That was a coaching decision.
It was at Florida State. And when was that? 2008.
Over a decade.
Tyrod got hurt and Glennon got hurt. And they had to bring in Corey Holt.
Right.
And Corey immediately throws a touchdown pass on a fade route. Great stuff.
Yeah, it was. And then, so even if you do count this as needing your third quarterback, the UNC game, I mean, that was 11 years later. So you're talking once every decade for Virginia Tech when they've needed their third quarterback. So you play those percentages, and you just don't rep your third quarterback very much. You have limited amount of practice time with these guys. It's not the NFL where you sit around the facility all day and can do whatever. You have a limited amount of time you have with these guys, so you want to get the guys who are going to play all the reps. So now that Quincy is getting second-string reps, I think he'll make more progress, or his progress will be faster in the passing game, simply because he's getting more reps. And I think that's key to his development. If there is any kind of a quarterback controversy, and it won't be until the spring, in my opinion. But at this point, man, if Hooker keeps playing like he's played, what coach in the world has ever pulled the plug on a good quarterback? You could argue that Dabo did it at Clemson with Trevor Lawrence over Kelly Bryant. But, Kelly Bryant
was limited.
Kelly Bryant couldn't throw the football down the field. And Clemson has different goals than Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's goal is to win the next game, right? Clemson's goal is they're looking long-term, beating Alabama for the national championship, and they knew they needed a quarterback who could throw the ball downfield to accomplish that goal. So they made that change early in the season, and they knew that nobody in the ACC was going to be able to beat them, no matter who their quarterback was. So they were able to bleed Lawrence, so to speak.
Because if I remember correctly, it was the semifinals the year before where Kelly Bryant.
They lost 24-3.
They got a look at Clemson with Kelly Bryant against Alabama, and it wasn't good.
They couldn't throw the football. You got to be able to throw the football down the field.
What a close game.
You got to be able to throw the ball downfield to beat Alabama.
Last thing on the quarterbacks, Will, is there a chance that we see Quincy Patterson, in your opinion, get more maybe wildcat runs in the offense? Do you think that that's something with Hooker, who's been playing so well, who's 8 of 12 against North Carolina before he left? If you bring in Quincy, does that halt the momentum of the offense? bottom line, do we see more Quincy Patterson on the field, even if he's the backup or no?
I think if you asked me to pick one and bet money, I would bet you'd see him some. I have no clue how much. I felt like up until the North Carolina game, and we talked about this before, I remember saying on the podcast at one point, if I could give Quincy one piece of advice, it would be put the pedal to the metal and run hard. I have not seen him run hard. We saw him run hard against North Carolina, so that's kind of new. So I'm not the head coach. I don't know what Fuente has been willing to put the backups in there here and there, especially Quincy. If it was me, I'd put him out there and try a few things and kind of just see what he looked like. How aggressively is he running? How hard is he hitting the hole? How well is Notre Dame defending him and the offense when he's in there? And I don't know how much of that depends upon how well things are going with Hendon Hooker. They were going pretty darn well in the North Carolina game until he got hurt. So
yeah, just like things were going well in the Pittsburgh game and the Boston College game in 2003 when they pulled Brian Randall and put in Marcus Fick. Right?
Yeah.
And the things bogged down when you change quarterbacks.
So I think I'm changing my answer here. I think if Hendon goes out there and the offense is doing well, I don't think Fuente will mess with it.
No, I think I've always been an advocate of using Quincy in short yardage situations when you need a yard. I think he is a guy that could be good in that role. Now, with the caveat of you can't, if you do use him like that, you can't go out there and run the same play every time. Eventually, you have to run something like a pop pass.
Pass. We're all looking for the pop pass.
Yeah, we're all looking for that.
So
that's the Sam Rogers play over the middle.
Yes,
right?
Gerard Evans, Sam Rogers. Eventually, they're going to run that thing, and there's going to be about 100 people are going to say, "See, I told you it was coming."
Yeah, exactly.
That's so true.
Yeah. So I think at some point you have to show something off that read option, and you have to let him throw it on a 3rd and short situation. Otherwise, if you're a linebacker, if you feel like there's a 95% chance it's going to be a run, you're ignoring your key reads, and you're just attacking your gap as soon as the ball is snapped. And you're not paying attention to your reads at all because you know he's going to run it. Mm-hmm. And that makes offenses easier to defend when linebackers don't have to read their keys. So at some point you have to do something to make those linebackers hesitate and actually read their keys. So I'd like to play Quincy Patterson. I don't want to play Quincy Patterson just because he was an Elite 11 recruit. And I think that's why people keep asking. Look, Hendon Hooker's ranking wasn't all that different than Quincy Patterson's. They were both about the same in the national rankings. One got invited to the Elite 11 finals and one didn't. But there wasn't that much difference between the two in the rankings or in the offer lists or anything like that. I mean, Hendon Hooker, I believe, had a Notre Dame offer. He was talking this week about how he took a visit to Notre Dame and was like, "Man, it was cold. Can we go back inside?"
Yeah.
So I'll close with this. Hooker's numbers in this 3-0 record that he's helped lead Virginia Tech to, completing 57% of his passes, 572 yards, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 178.2 rating in those games. So he's also run the ball 41 times for 160 yards and a touchdown.
He's been very efficient. I don't think anybody can complain about his performances at all. You'd like to see a higher completion percentage, but he had a few drops in there. And he was 10 of 20 against Miami. That was his first game action. So we'll see. Notre Dame has film on him now, so you wonder what'll happen. But, but North Carolina had film on him too. And that was an exciting end to the North Carolina game. But, once we got rolling with Hooker, we were rolling. And they didn't stop Tech at all in the fourth quarter. And so I don't know if that's that dramatic 6 overtime game if Hendon Hooker's the quarterback for the whole game. I could see Tech winning that game and not going to overtime at all. Yeah.
So it's the responsibility of Virginia Tech coaching staff to keep moving the target. Film's out there on him. Keep moving the target. You know, and that's what coaching staffs do.
So here's kind of a question I was thinking about yesterday because I wanted to bring up the running backs and their receiving core, and we typically go position group by position group. I'm going to ask kind of a broad question, and I'm curious to see where you guys run with it regarding these 3 players. So there's 5 games left, and here we go. We're in the final stretch of the season for Tech. which of these three players is the most important to the success of Tech's offense from now until the end of the season? Trey Turner, Damon Hazelton, or Deshaun McClease?
Which individual player?
Deshaun McClease.
I would say McClease also.
Yeah.
I think having Hooker and Hazelton together healthy finally has
You mean Turner and Hazelton, or
Turner and Hazelton
Right.
healthy at the same time has made a big difference. But if you lost, but at least if you lose one of those guys, you've still got the other. If you lost McClease, you don't know exactly what you have behind him. Keshawn King's been hurt. Is Dalton Keene your backup tailback?
You're going to play Taj Gary? What are you going to do?
Yeah. It's just so much unknown there. There's less unknown with the receivers. They're not as deep as we thought they were going to be, but there's still less unknown there. So I would certainly go McClease.
I'm just amazed with the transformation of Deshaun McClease.
He's killing it.
The move he put on, was it Chaz Surratt?
Yeah.
When we put that move on him in the hole, oh my gosh, and he still lacks that. Once he gets himself in the open field, he lacks that breakaway speed, but everything else is looking pretty good.
Yeah, amazing how much better he looks since Jerry Kill got here.
Everybody keeps saying that.
I'll give you some numbers on McClease. I was looking through Virginia Tech's game notes and some numbers on the running game, because I wish we could pull back the audio from the podcast leading up to the Furman week. And we were talking about the running game, and Coach Fuente was talking about the running game. Everybody was talking about the running game. Here are some numbers. First of all, Tech is now 24-6 under Fuente when producing 150 yards of net rushing yards and 14-3 with 200-plus net rushing yards in his career. Right now, Tech is 5th in the ACC, averaging 175 yards a game on the ground. And McClease is 8th in the ACC in rushing with 67.9 yards per game.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And the thing is, those numbers are trending up.
Yeah.
There were some games earlier this season where Tech couldn't run the ball. And if you're thinking, well, what if Hooker had played in that game or in those first 4 games? What if he had been the guy? How much better would those rushing numbers be?
Yeah, and that's let's pick up that discussion later when we're talking about, kind of the Notre Dame game and trying to make predictions for it.
Yep. Here's my last thing about Tech before we step aside and talk about Notre Dame. Only point I want to talk about the defense and coming off the bye was Reggie Floyd missed the first half against North Carolina. He was ejected in the second half of the Rhode Island game for targeting. Saw Devin Hunter play a little bit in the second half of that North Carolina game. And then, of course, the unsung hero in overtime was Khalil Ladler. Mm-hmm. You look at that safety position. Are you feeling more comfortable with Hunter and Ladler getting more reps? Is Reggie Floyd the guy back there?
I mean, I think, yeah, Reggie Floyd's the guy. He actually played his best game against North Carolina.
Yeah.
So he responded to all the criticism and played a good game against Carolina. Shamari Connor, up until the North Carolina game, had been great. I don't know if maybe he had a slight injury or something like that, but people remember the Khalil Ladler plays. But Khalil had 2 or 3 before that where he just whiffed on tackles in the open field. So everybody remembers the plays he made because he made them, and that made them forget about the earlier plays he didn't make. So I think Connor, yeah, it's possible he might have been hurt because even when Ladler messed up just as bad as Connor did, they didn't put Connor right back in the game. Ladler, I guess, was a little better in coverage in that game, but I still roll with Chamari long term there, of course. Just because they played well for a half in the case of Devin Hunter, and Hunter, I wouldn't say he played well. He didn't play great, but he didn't play bad either. He made tackles when he had to make them and didn't get burned. He was there. Previously,
when we'd seen him, he looked lost. And
right,
he didn't
look
lost.
So it was a step in the right direction.
Right.
But, you're not talking about a dominant football player here. Reggie made a more positive impact in the second half than Devin did in the first half, in my opinion. So, no, I'm still not comfortable with them because of the inconsistencies.
I don't trust that position group.
Like they're gonna have to do it for multiple games in a row.
Yeah.
Because you can't come out and say, this guy played well for a half, this guy played well for a half. Ladler, who had been benched for Connor, came in and played 22 snaps and 15 of them were good and made 2 key plays in overtime that everybody saw, well, there's a reason he got benched in the first place for Connor, right? So you're going to have to, for me, you got to have more consistency there before I'm on board, and I'm talking game-by-game consistency. Now, I do like having a guy like Ladler who can pretty much play every safety spot. He can play whip, free safety, rover. It's good to have a versatile guy like that in the program. But that group still has a long way to go. Now, hopefully the UNC game was a turning point for them, and they start to play well from here on out. Because if they do play consistent football, honestly, the rest of the defense is playing consistent football.
When this defense gives up big plays, it's typically the same guys / position groups that are making the mistakes. Right. That's what it boils down to. I don't find myself watching the defensive tackles and thinking they're a liability. I don't find myself watching the Mike position and thinking it's a liability. I don't think the corners are a liability anymore.
They're positives at this point.
You know, and opposing coaching staffs aren't dumb, as we've said multiple times. It's all about finding the mismatches and exploiting them. I did not expect North Carolina to go after Chamari Connor, but they knew they had a mismatch and they exploited it.
Yeah,
and Notre Dame will do the same. They'll watch film and they'll be like, okay. When the ball's on this hash mark, if Hollyfield's in the game and Floyd's in the game, we're going to go after that area.
Notre Dame doesn't have a dynamic outside receiver this year like they had last year with the guy
Miles Boykin.
Yeah, who starts for the Ravens now. Right. But they got a good tight end and they got a good slot receiver, in my opinion. So that's what you got to watch out for.
And that is a perfect preview for what we're going to talk about on the other side of this timeout. We'll talk about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish coming off of a 45-14 loss to Michigan. What does it mean for Virginia Tech? We'll discuss on the other side of this timeout. You're listening to the Tech Sideline Podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm. Welcome back aboard the Tech Sideline Podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm. We've got Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes producing on the podcast set, Chris Coleman, Will Stewart, and I'm Evan Hughes. We transitioned from talking about Virginia Tech over the bye week, a little bit of recap of the North Carolina game, and now it's time to focus on the Fighting Irish. Notre Dame coming in this weekend 5-2 on the season. 45-14 loss at Michigan, maybe one of the biggest wins of the Jim Harbaugh era for a guy who's been getting a ton of slack for not winning the big games as of late. Well, I want to start with this. I mean, I don't think a lot of people saw Notre Dame losing 45-14 on the road. Are the Hokies getting the Irish at a good time right now?
I don't know that I'm about to answer that question specifically, but at this point, Chris has written his preview. He's broken down Notre Dame. We'll get into some of that stuff. I've read it, edited, and written my part of the preview. Notre Dame appears to be overrated.
Well, they're not overrated anymore.
Well, they're still 16th in the country.
Are they really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
16th.
I watched a good portion, and we'll talk about this. I watched a good portion of their game against Georgia earlier in the year, and I was impressed with Notre Dame. I thought they just ran out of gas late in the game. I thought they didn't have the horses to hang with Georgia, but they put up a pretty good performance.
Lost by 6 on the road to a playoff.
I thought it was a larger margin.
23-17 final score.
Okay. They have not been very impressive since then against Power 5 competition, and Chris has probably got those numbers in his head, and he'll break it down for you. I don't think they're as bad as they looked against Michigan, but I don't think they're as good as they looked against Georgia. And for me, we'll get into specifics here in a second, but in looking at Virginia Tech versus Notre Dame, you're going to find that the biggest – well, I'll just jump right into it because I tallied up the numbers last night. If I remember correctly, Notre Dame starts 12 seniors.
It's like 9 juniors.
7 juniors. That's 19. 3 sophomores. 12 seniors, 7 juniors, 3 sophomores, and 0 freshmen. Check our game preview.
I think they've only got like 1 freshman in the 2 deep, right?
Could be.
Something like that.
Virginia Tech starts 1 senior, 7 juniors. Wow. Yes, 1 senior, 7 juniors, 10 sophomores, and 3 freshmen. Roughly. Those numbers don't quite add up. Check the game preview later for the exact numbers. You get the idea. Notre Dame in the freshman sophomore group has 3 guys. Virginia Tech in the freshman-sophomore group has 13 guys. If all else was equal experience-wise, I would really like Virginia Tech's chances.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's got some strong points to their team. They got some weaknesses too, just like Virginia Tech. This thing would really be a good matchup if the experience levels were equal.
They've got really good defensive ends. I don't think.
I'd take their defensive ends.
Their defensive tackles don't appear to be as good without Jerry Tillery, who was a first-round pick of the Chargers. But the Notre Dame team that came into Lane Stadium last year was
a college football playoff team.
A much better team than this Notre Dame team, and
lot deeper, like more guys who were better.
They had 3 running backs last year,
yep.
And they got 1 this year. They only got 1 running back on the roster with more than 24 carries.
Yeah.
They just don't quite. They don't come at you with waves of talent like they did last year, in my opinion. I think sometimes, we see specific things, and we view things through that lens. And my only lens to Notre Dame this year was the Georgia game, because I think Georgia was really good, and I watched Notre Dame go toe-to-toe with them from a physical standpoint.
It was a great game.
It was a great game. And then I kind of stopped watching them. I watched some of their second half against UVA, and I'm like, considering how awful UVA's offensive line is and how they lack talent at the skill positions, Notre Dame should be probably beating UVA by more than 15.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, UVA was really up for the game. It was a huge game for them. Then
I don't remember. Was that game in South Bend or Charlottesville?
South Bend.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I'm mad that they get to go in September and we always have to go in November. But anyway.
Side note.
Yeah. Then they struggled to beat a USC team that is pretty good but not great. And then, I didn't watch their game against Michigan. I remember checking my phone late that night. I don't remember what I was doing, but I'm like, oh, yeah, Notre Dame and Michigan are playing. I looked at my phone, and it's 45-7. And I'm like, what in the world is going on?
Yeah.
And then Notre Dame scored a late touchdown to make it even closer.
Keep in mind, that's a Michigan offense that has, beat Iowa 10-3, only scored 21 against Penn State. They've been a mess.
They ran it all over Notre Dame. And so that lens I had for the Georgia game, they've been completely different in all the other games they've played. Ian Book's completion percentage is down 9% from last year.
Yeah.
From 68% to 59% thereabouts.
And in doing the roster cards, I'm pretty sure Book came into the Tech game last year over 70%.
Right. And
but he wound up at like 68 for the year.
Yeah. And they've racked up their numbers against 2 really bad non-conference teams, Bowling Green and New Mexico.
Yeah.
But their numbers against Power 5 opponents offensively, they're right there with Miami, Georgia Tech, Pitt, and UVA, who all Virginia Tech fans should know have horrible offenses this year. Well, Notre Dame's is right there with them against Power 5 opponents. So something like 343 yards per game or something like that. Yep. They're not good.
Yeah.
I think they're better. They should be better than they've shown. I think they lack an identity. They lack running back depth. The one running back they do have has
Tony Jones Jr.
Yeah, he has bruised ribs. He only had 8 carries in their last game. This is a big opportunity for Virginia Tech.
So you think this?
I don't know what it'll do. What that loss does to Notre Dame mentally. And that's not, you can't predict that. Now, Brian Kelly, I watched his press conference yesterday, and he was like, we lost our identity, we lost our culture, blah, 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 all that stuff against Notre Dame, and he repeated it over and over and over again. And basically, he said we weren't tough enough. Michigan out-toughed us. And, maybe that's true, because they certainly looked tough against Georgia, didn't they?
Yeah.
They're tougher and better than they showed, but I also don't think they're as good as they showed against Georgia, considering what they've done in all their other games. Now that we have 7 games of evidence now. So it's a big opportunity for Tech. I do think their defense will play better than it did against Michigan, but I just don't think their offense is that good. And getting tougher isn't necessarily going to solve their issues there.
So if Virginia Tech's got Deshaun Crawford back and he's 100%, not favoring a leg or anything like that, if Notre Dame's offense is incapable of identifying and exploiting mismatches and weaknesses, this could be a long day for them, because Tech is they've got their spots on defense where they're putting talent on the field, and this could be a 60-minute ball game, and I'm not sure. So that segues into something else I wanted to talk about. We on our Tech Sideline Twitter account, I retweeted last night something interesting from OxVT, where he was showing Virginia Tech's offense the last 3 games since they made the switch from Ryan Willis to Hendon Hooker / Quincy Patterson. If you look at Virginia Tech's offensive numbers for the last 3 games, they're very good. I won't bore you with the details. They're good. They're solid, particularly turnover margin. And one of the things you got to like about Notre Dame's offense is Ian Book's only thrown 2 interceptions. He's got 15 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions.
Yeah, but those were against Power 5 teams. So
and who was the Miami quarterback who had no interceptions coming in?
Jared Williams. Tech, yeah.
But I think Miami had probably been untested to that point. I can't remember who they'd played, but Book's been tested, and he's got a lot of experience. He's played in 27 games in his career. So, it could come down to which one of those guys is going to break, or either one of them,
So here's what Chris just said. I don't have his name written down, and it's escaping me at the moment. But who will be a tougher quarterback for Tech to face this year? North Carolina's fresh Sam Howell. Now it's coming back to me. Sam Howell or Ian Book?
Howell.
Interesting.
They stress you. North Carolina's offense, it's not just Howell, but he's talented enough to make this offense work. But their philosophy is they stretch you side to side with the running game, and then they stretch you vertically with the passing game. So it's really hard to play against that defense, particularly if you're a safety, and particularly if you're a safety on the wide side of the field. So the 2 guys that were most likely to have bad games against UNC were Divine Diablo and Shamari Connor. Diablo didn't have a bad game, but Connor did. Yeah. Notre Dame's offense doesn't put as much mental stress on you, and Book doesn't have the NFL arm that Howell does. He's got more experience and everything like that, yeah, but to me, I would rather face Book than Howell for sure. If we're talking about Howell in the UNC offense and Book in the Notre Dame offense, I fear Carolina more than Notre Dame for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
All right, so last point I'll make before we get predictions, and then want to take some time for our Facebook Live questions. Notre Dame's defense, first 5 games, combined 74 points allowed. In their last 2 games, they have given up 72 points combined.
So who was the game before Michigan?
It was Michigan. They lost 45-14, and then it was USC 30-27 final.
Right.
So, and I'll make this point before you guys make your predictions. So Virginia Tech has, the last couple of games, they've had to score 30-plus points to win the game. Notre Dame is 9-24 when allowing 30-plus points under Brian Kelly.
Well, I think unless you're a Big 12 team, most coaches are probably about 9-24 when they give up 30-plus points.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, let's dive into it. So I'm curious now to hear your predictions because, listen, the spread right now in Vegas, it's like 16.5 to 17.
I think that's too high. I think Vegas is slow catching up on things. I think they were slow catching up at the beginning of the season that Virginia Tech wasn't very good with Ryan Willis at quarterback.
Yeah, Tech was not beating the spread.
It took them a month to figure that out, and I'm sure they actually figured it out. And I don't think they figured out that Tech isn't the same team, or at least they don't appear to be the same team with Hooker at quarterback. And I don't think they've quite figured out that Notre Dame is not this dynamic top 10 team that everybody thought they were going to be when the season started. I mean, they're averaging 343 yards against Power 5 teams, for goodness sake. The only games they broke 400 yards over were against USC, who has the 98th ranked defense, and Louisville, who has the 103rd ranked defense. And they barely got over 400 yards against Louisville. It was like 423. So they have their struggles on that side of the ball. I don't see it being some kind of 17-point game. I think it'll be a 4-quarter football.
I don't bet,
right?
And I say in my mind, if I was a betting man, I'd do this. And gosh, it's amazing how often it turns out to be wrong. But if I was a betting man, I would not bet Notre Dame to cover that spread.
Yeah, I would have bet on Miami earlier this season too.
Absolutely,
and lost a lot of money, right?
Well, where I really decided you should never ever bet was the Virginia Tech North Carolina State basketball game last year.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Gosh,
oh,
in the 20s at halftime, right?
J-Rob's out, Virginia Tech's going to get destroyed. And
then, and NC State has the historical.
What was the final at, like 47? I don't think either
24.
team.
And NC State ended up with 24 points.
That was the worst and yet most amazing sporting event I've ever watched.
It's way up there. Yeah,
that's
where the coaches say a win's a win, right?
And that's why we watch sports, because you just never know when you're going to see
a
6 overtime game or a college team scoring 24 points in basketball.
Sports are the best reality television shows. So,
That's right.
All right, let's dive into our predictions. Chris, I'll start with you, and then we go to Will. Give us a score. Who wins, and someone win or lose for Tech that's going to have a great game.
I picked it 27-20 Notre Dame. I might revise that a little bit before I post my preview. I don't know. I think Notre Dame is good but not great. And I'm not going to say they're trending down because of the Michigan game. I think that's unfair. But I do think at best they're treading water. Where Tech is moving up. And no, to be fair, the Tech's best wins are against a pair of 4-4 football teams, so it's not like they've, they haven't beaten the Notre Dame yet. They have an opportunity to. I do think it'll be a 4-quarter football game. I do think Tech is a year away from winning this game.
Yeah.
If this game was played next year, I don't know what Notre Dame's going to look like next year, but
well, they're losing a lot of seniors.
Yeah, that's true.
And a new quarterback.
Yeah.
Who's that player for Tech that's going to have to stand out?
Hooker. I mean, he's going to have to keep doing what he's been doing, and Virginia Tech's going to have to keep running the football. Now, we don't know what Hendon Hooker looks like as a quarterback when Virginia Tech can't run the football yet. So if Notre Dame can stop Tech's running game, then we'll find out, right? And that's when it could be a long day for him if he's in an offense that is one-dimensional. And I say all this. I've made all these predictions and talked about how I think Tech has a good chance to win the game. I'm actually fairly close to picking them to win the game. But we also don't know for 100% fact that he's healthy and ready to roll. I mean, Fuente says he is. Man, that was a nasty-looking knee injury.
It was.
Well, Fuente said he actually hurt himself a couple plays before.
Yeah,
that.
he did. So I'm assuming he's 100%, but you never truly know.
So for me, I'd pick Notre Dame by 10. I would like this. If you flip the experience levels, I would really like Tech's chances. If you flip the experience levels, there's no way in the world I'd pick Notre Dame. Yeah, by the way, you go back to that 2016 game. I ran the numbers on that as well, and the teams were pretty much evenly experienced.
Yeah.
And it wound up being a 34-31 ball game. Pretty good football game. Virginia Tech got down 17-0. I remember sitting there in Notre Dame Stadium going, it's cold out here, and I came all the way up here for this, and it turned out to be pretty good. I think more so than Hendon having a good game, what has he got? 7 touchdowns and no interceptions. Now he's putting the football on the ground some. He's having trouble with snaps here and there. He can't turn it over. For Virginia Tech to win this game, at some point, I always say this, and people get mad at me. He's got 7 touchdown passes and no interceptions. The bad game's going to come. The 2 and 3 interception game. It's going to happen at some point. It can't happen up there if you want to win. So he does. Not only does he have to have a good game, I think more than that, he can't turn it over. But I see Notre Dame winning this thing something like 31-21. Would not surprise me at all to see Virginia Tech actually win. I think the bigger surprise for me would be if Virginia Tech got blown out. And by blown out, I mean 34-10 or something like that. That would surprise me more than a competitive game or a Virginia Tech win.
Yeah, I'm gonna revise my preview to a certain extent. I think. How many points did North Carolina have at the end of regulation against Tech?
Wasn't it tied at 31?
Correct.
It was tied at 31. Carolina's offense is much better than Notre Dame's offense.
I know.
And I picked Notre Dame I think I picked 27-20. I don't know, man. Maybe 24-20.
Right. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it just
and I'm picking them to score 31. I'm assuming that they are going to exploit some mismatches and get some big plays. Maybe they won't.
I mean, UNC did it. I mean, honestly, half of UNC's offense was like on 4 plays. And I just don't think Notre Dame can stretch you as much vertically as they don't put as much stress on you.
Yeah, so UNC exploited Shamari Connor, and then later on they got that flea flicker touchdown.
Yeah.
They
don't exploit. Excuse me. They don't stress you in open space like Carolina does, in my opinion. I think they're easier to defend because of that. I don't know, man. As we know, predicting Coastal Division games this year is we still haven't built our wheel of destiny to spin before every game.
We do have an open spot on the wall there.
Yeah, we could do it. We could just put a Magic 8 ball in over here next to the Terranome.
Yeah, I think it's gonna.
I think it's gonna come down to
Notre Dame favored by 17. I'm not seeing that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, listen, I'm looking forward to, first of all, reading the rest of the content this week on TechSideline.com to get me even more pumped up for this game. But I know we've got some pumped up listeners and viewers right now on Facebook. That's where we bring in our fantastic producer, Malcolm Stewart. What's going on?
Not much. Let's start with, I'm reading from Michael Sands. He's got a 2-part question. I want to start with the second part. Rumors that the future defensive coordinator has agreed in principle. Do you have any thoughts who it is? Any ideas?
I don't know. He started that rumor. Ask him.
I don't. No, I don't have any thoughts on who it is. I'm not going to go there because I could throw a name just for discussion. I haven't been given a name. And if I throw a name out there for discussion, it's going to live for 3 weeks, and people are going to say that I'm saying
Will Stewart said.
No. I'm not going there. I'm not taking the bait. Sorry, but I did hear from a decent source that they've agreed in principle with a future DC. Does that mean they've been talking to somebody who's currently employed or somebody who's not employed?
I don't think it would be somebody who's not employed.
And I'm biting my tongue. I'm not going to tell you about a guy who knows Fuente and actually is unemployed right now. Not doing it. Not going there. What's the other part of the question?
Recruiting looks really bad for the coming year. We have the 79th ranked class somewhere around there.
Dropping every day. So for those of you, I'll let you ask the question here in a second. For those of you who aren't caught up, Noah Kim is decommitted. And I believe
Steven Singh's
decommitted, but he wasn't going to probably.
He was never going to qualify. Honestly, in my opinion, they never should have taken his commitment anyway because he had no chance to qualify. And so when he decommitted, it just makes him look bad for people who don't know anything about Steven Singh's. Like I never expected him to sign with Tech, so I don't care that he decommitted, right?
So last night I'm sitting there. Should we run an update that Steven Singh's decommitted?
I didn't even.
I like to have that stuff in print, so to speak. I'm like, but if I put that up there, then you got to add that he probably wasn't going to qualify and probably wasn't going to make it. Yeah. And I don't want to say that stuff about prospects in print.
Right.
So you wind up writing what is a biased article which says this guy just decommitted from Tech, and that's the only piece of information you're giving out. That looks bad, and the whole story is much more nuanced than that.
Yeah. No, but the original question is, sorry, Malcolm.
Well, what is the question?
What do you think, like, sort of a cause is? It seems we're with the big-time recruits, but we just can't close.
Yeah,
a small class, worse recruiting.
I don't – it's a combination of everything. It was never going to be that highly ranked class because there's limited spots in this class. But the problem is, to me, I don't care whether they're recruiting a 3-star guy, a 4-star guy, a 5-star guy, or whatever. It's because nobody wanted Christian Darrisaw, but he was one of Tech's top targets, and look, he's a really good player, right, even though he was a 2-star guy. So I don't care if it's what his ranking is. I just want them to see them sign a high percentage of their top targets.
Right.
And if that gives them the 21st ranked class, great. If that gives them the 41st ranked class, that's great too because I trust their evaluation ability. But they've lost on too many of their top targets this year. It's understandable on defense because those guys don't know who their coaches are going to be.
But didn't have a contract at first,
right?
And then
now they know he's retiring,
right?
So you don't even know who your position coaches are going to be. So think about it like this: say you go in, you interview for a job, you're talking to the company president. They basically offer you the job, and you really like the company. You really want to work there. And on the way out the door, it's like, oh, by the way. Let's say you're in sales. We're going to have a new vice president of sales shortly after you start working. We don't know who it's going to be, and he's going to bring in some of his own people, so we don't know who you're going to be working with on a day-to-day basis. Do you still want the job?
You're not going to take that.
You're going to be like,
unless you're
no.
an idiot.
Right, yeah.
Unless you really hate your current job.
Right, so it's just defensively, I totally understand it. Offensively, they've missed on some guys that I have a hard time reconciling in my head.
And this you follow it closer than I do. And this goes back to, there were a list of maybe 4 or 5 guys going into this recruiting cycle that you knew Virginia Tech really wanted, and most of them disappeared off the board early.
Right. So it's not that I don't have an issue with Tech's defensive recruiting this year. It's that I don't think there's anything they can realistically do about it.
Right.
It is what it is. And that's what happens when, Notre Dame's got 2 guys starting on their defense that I think would be playing for Virginia Tech if Frank Beamer's retirement situation didn't get drug out so long. Well, now who are we going to be talking about in 4 years and saying, man, that guy'd be playing for Virginia Tech if Bud Foster's retirement situation didn't drag out for so long. So that's just the way it is when you get into these situations, and there's nothing realistic that you can do about it. Offensively, I don't know. I don't know what the issue is, but I do think when the season's over, they need to sit down as a staff once the defensive staff is hired and talk about recruiting strategies and figure out if they do have issues on that side of the ball and what they need to do to address those issues.
Awesome. Great question.
Yeah, I like this one from Don Mason. In order to pull the upset Saturday, who has to have the bigger game, offense or defense?
I'm more fearful of Notre Dame's defense than I am their offense, but I will say this. If we go up there and shut down their offense, just shut it down, then we'll score enough points to win the game. Have enough confidence in our offense with Hooker in there.
So you think that
I'm going to go up there and say if the defense has their best game of the year, that would be more ideal than like the offense having their best game of the year, I think. Because the Notre Dame offense is bad enough, the Tech defense has their best game of the year. Notre Dame's getting shut down.
Right.
Like completely. That's my take. Whereas I think if the Tech offense went up there and had their best game of the year, Notre Dame's defense is good enough where the best game of the year for Tech might only equal 30 points or thereabouts.
Or less.
Right, yeah.
I'll go with that. I don't have a different opinion than that.
All right. Thanks so much to all of our viewers on Facebook Live this morning chiming in. Great discussion, and we are just about an hour on the podcast. Do want to mention that the question to the answer to the trivia question I said before the podcast, people should be able to get this one.
Yeah.
You guys want to go ahead and, by the way, the question, Tech is 2-0 in its previous games played in Indiana, 34-34 win against Notre Dame, of course, in 2016. The other one was?
That's the win over Purdue in 2015?
Year before.
2015, man, we should play Purdue more often.
Everybody wants to play Purdue.
Gosh,
they were decent last year, though.
That's true.
They beat Ohio State. Right?
Yeah. They were awful back then.
Remember
Brendan Motley was the quarterback, and Motley couldn't really do anything against anybody else, but somehow we dropped 50 points on Purdue.
Yeah, what was the final score of that game? You want to take
50-something to 20-something.
Was it 51-34 Purdue?
34.
They got a couple of late touchdowns when we had the backup defense in. Yeah.
34.
Yeah, 51-34. September 19th, 2015.
It wasn't as close as the final score indicated.
No. And I remember one play. I remember Adonis Alexander was playing safety, and he had an interception that I was blown away by the amount of ground he covered. And I thought, man, that guy's got a bright future. Didn't turn out to be a bright future at Virginia Tech, but I remember seeing that talent that day going, wow, that's an exceptional play.
Yeah.
And I think Matua Pawaka had a fumble return for a touchdown or something like that, or Tech blocked a punt,
I think even gimpy Trey Edmonds, who couldn't run that much at that point in his career, I think he had a long touchdown run in that game.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to point out is I ask each and every time at the end of the podcast what's on TechSideline.com the rest of the week. Will, want to give you a chance to talk about your great article you wrote, Virginia Tech's Coastal Championship Scenarios at 5-3. What's a little preview you can give about that article?
All right, so if Virginia Tech goes 6-2, they will win the Coastal because anybody else with 2 losses, they've already beaten. It implies they beat UVA. They've already beaten Carolina. Carolina could also go 6-2 in conference, but Tech would win the head-to-head tiebreaker. So 6-2 is a no-brainer. 4-4, it would be fun if you had 2 days to analyze. We don't. So I looked at the 5-3 scenarios, and I spent 1,200 words coming up with the brilliant conclusion that if Virginia Tech goes 5-3 in order to win the Coastal, they'll basically have to beat UVA and Pitt. They'll really have to beat UVA. UVA's only got 3 games left. One of them's against Georgia Tech, who you assume they'll beat. Even if they lose the other one, they're going to have I can't remember the number of losses. Tech's going to have to beat UVA to win the Coastal at 5-3. They'll probably have to beat Pitt. But Pitt's got 4 games left and 2 losses. They could lose a couple other games, still beat Tech, wind up 4-4, and lose the division to a 5-3 Virginia Tech team. One of the things that really benefits Tech is their loss so far is to an Atlantic. One of their losses is to an Atlantic Division team, Boston College. I think one of the more likely games that Virginia Tech has to lose in the ACC is Wake Forest. Not the most likely, but one of the more likely. Wake is going to really stress Tech when they come in here. So if Tech winds up with 3 losses and 1 is to Boston College and 1 is to Wake, then the only Coastal Division team you've lost to is Duke.
So how does that come into play if you know the top of your
Head-to-head
head?
matchups.
Okay.
Yeah, head-to-head matchups are the first thing. And people are asking me, well, what about in the case of a 3-way tiebreaker? Because I wrote this whole article talking about head-to-head and 2-way tiebreakers. People say, what about if 3 teams wind up being 5-3 and Tech's one of them? In that scenario, I believe the only team that would give Virginia Tech difficulty is if Duke went 5-3.
They won't.
And I think they're currently 2-3. And I just don't see them winning their last 3 and winding up in a 3-way tie with the Hokies. So, I believe somebody else on the message boards, I didn't analyze it to this degree, but somebody else on the message boards said that Virginia Tech is the only Coastal team in control of their destiny. I don't know that that's true. I think UVA is also.
Duke is 4-4 too.
Well, UVA will be if they beat Carolina this weekend, right?
Well, they are now. So, but technically they are.
So technically they are now.
Yeah, Carolina's eliminated if they lose to UVA this weekend.
So Duke has beaten Tech, lost to Pitt, beat Georgia Tech, lost to UVA, lost to North Carolina. They have Notre Dame, obviously not an ACC team, Syracuse at Wake Forest, and Miami at home to close out their ACC season.
Yeah, at Wake is going to be a tough nut for Duke to crack. That fierce Wake crowd. But I don't. You never mind what you think about Syracuse. I don't see Duke getting through both Wake and Miami and winding up.
Think about this conversation we're having. What if we ran ClemsonSideline.com? What do you have to talk about all year?
We're talking about the rest of the country, right? We're talking about Alabama.
You're spending all your time splitting hairs, is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really think our third string tailback should be fourth string instead, because when he was in the game in the fourth quarter in this 50-point blowout, he looked slightly better than this other guy.
You spend a lot of time talking about Trevor Lawrence's interceptions,
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, well, I think it's a great way to close the podcast. That's a great article that's on our homepage right now on TechSideline.com that Will wrote. CC, pretty normal week moving forward?
Well, except for it's a total of 4 days in the week because I'm leaving Friday morning.
And I'm leaving Thursday morning.
And he's leaving Thursday. So it's going to be 5 days of content in 4 days.
Yeah.
So pretty normal. There's no true freshman report this week because there was no game this past week. Other than that, it's going to be a normal week.
Fantastic. All right, well, both of you enjoy your time in South Bend this weekend, and looking forward to recapping it on Monday. Hopefully you get back on time.
I hope just as long as I get back before midnight, I'll be fine.
And enjoy, I don't want to mess up the name, but tailgating with the Bend?
Tailgate the Bend, yep.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to it. And maybe you can take a picture of all the TSLers there and all having a good time in South Bend. Right. All right, well, that'll do it for this edition of the Tech Sideline podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm. I want to thank everybody who chimed in on Facebook Live. Great conversation. Hokies and the Irish play on Saturday, and we'll recap it on Monday morning right here on the Tech Sideline podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm. Have a great week, Hokies.